Hello, in this second follow-up to episode 5 of the podcast, I wanted to talk a little bit about the audio podcast player that's presently being used on the show's website. This is a Shadow DOM web component, and it's made by Dave Rupert, who, among other things, is the co-host of the Shop Talk podcast, where this player has been used for many years. And he's kindly made this available to all over at HTML with Superpowers, along with some other web components that he's made. And we can find the working example and code over at CodePen. And this is Shadow DOM, so the CSS that's being used here is encapsulated within the JavaScript. Now, it's very bare bones here, but there is some CSS, some flexbox here that's aligning all the elements horizontally and bringing in these custom icons. Now, obviously, we need to add to this, and in my post that will go along with this video, I've included the extra CSS that I've added to it, and link will be below this. I've also included a link to the course that Dave does if you want to learn more about making web components, and some of the debates that are going on between whether you should use a light DOM component or a shadow DOM. And that's really what I want to cover in this. So what we need to do to bring it into our project's pretty easy. We just need to grab the JavaScript, which I've done. So I'll bring up my editor, and I've put that in its own file. And of course, then I need to link that script to the pages where it's going to be used, which I've done here just before the closing body tag. And I just need to grab my HTML and place that where I want the player to show. So I'll go back to the HTML here. This is a web component, and they have custom elements, which can be any name you want. We can break up just one word if we like, but we need to have the dash just to make sure that it's not going to conflict with any future spec that comes to HTML. It has an opening and a closing tag, and of course it's referenced in the JavaScript over here. In between these tags, then we need to include an audio element and source that to where our file is. So I'll just go and grab this HTML, and I shall place this on my example page just over here. Now you'll see this looks a little bit different, so I should just quickly explain that. And it's because in my style sheet, I have forced the color scheme to dark, which means that anything that I haven't coded myself, the user style sheets are going to do that for me in a dark format here. If I, as we will probably do in a later version of this site, honor people's preferences, you'll see, and then I put light and dark, you'll see that my own preference is for light, so it's gone to that. But for the moment, we're forcing everyone to dark. And what I really wanted to talk about here was the pros and cons with this. So I'll start with what I quite like about this. And that is that if someone comes to this page with JavaScript turned off, or it fails for some reason on them, let's make it fail, we will still get the audio tag showing, and the browser will show its default player, which we started with, and obviously it's the greenest and simplest way to do it. And it's okay on Chromium browsers, which we're showing here, because we've got playback speed, which is great. The downside of that, which I can show you if I just bring up Firefox, is that we don't have the same functionality or styling across the different browsers. So it's not ideal if this is the key part of your site. What you may notice here, although this is taken care of by the component itself, you'll notice that it's preloaded the file regardless of me clicking on it. So you can just quickly add in here, which is sensible to do, I think, a preload of none, and that will stop that. So it'll only come on if it's played, but the component itself does that anyway. As you can see, it's 0 here, and it's coming in when we click on play. What a lot of people like about the Shadow DOM is that encapsulating of the CSS. It makes it portable. It means that I can take this to another project, and if there's a naming clash or issue with specificity, it's okay. It's guarded against that. But for me, that isn't such a plus. Let me just go over to the JavaScript here, and I'll uncomment the CSS so we can see that here. This isn't so great because I control my naming, and I tend to keep things simple. And what makes this more difficult is that I then have to do my CSS coding, within the JavaScript here, where I don't get any of the prompts that Emmett gives me in VS Code, which does much of the writing for me. So I'm more prone to make a mistake, and I get no help along the way. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. And we can't style this from the outside. We can do things like pulling in some styles, like my variables here. So if I keep them consistent across projects, then it can bring those in. But otherwise, I can't style much of this externally. So for me, that's one of the downsides. And the other big downside with this is that the CSS is in the JavaScript, so it has to process that before it gets to the CSS. And it creates a cumulative layout shift issue, which you probably know about already, but it's something that is part of Core Web Vitals, something that's measured by Google's Page Speed Insights, and it's here. It's not too bad on our site as it is, but I can demonstrate it better because there's more going on the Shop Talk side. So if I just go and inspect here and change the speed that we load to more mobile, or fast mobile in that case. And what Google don't like is this thing where someone might move their finger or the mouse over here and then it quickly shifts. So it's not a very good experience. So we can't really get around that. But it swings and roundabouts with this. If we want the fallback to an audio player, if JavaScript fails, I think, as I understand it, we will need to have a shadow DOM component. And I can probably explain this by opening up this from HTML with superpowers and just enlarging it. So this is the code we get. And what we have is the shadow DOM open. And with shadow DOM, we get slots and the audio is placed in that. So if we want the fallback of the audio player, this, as I understand it, is the only route. So swings and roundabouts. We'll probably get rid of the player and swap it for what I was talking about in the last video, which is an image link that is going to YouTube where they are there. And we'll probably just put some links into other podcast players if people just want to listen to the audio. Partly that is that one of the nice things I think about web components is that they're free of dependencies. But if we actually look at this one, it's made up, as many are, using a framework called Lit, which I think is by Google, which has the benefits of making it very easy to make up these components. And it makes it shareable with other third-party libraries. The downside of that is that it brings in or imports in some other files, as we can see here. So I feel, this is just my own personal feeling, is it's some extra dependencies that we get on that. Let me just bring up the editor so I can show you where this is imported over here. We can update this. I have tested it. The latest version is 3.0.0 and it works. I think the only thing that's changed is the support for IE11. So if you don't need that, you can do that. But that's just my general feelings on this. So we'll probably change. But I think as options go for a podcast player, this is pretty good and it works well. Anyway, that's enough from me. I hope this was useful and I hope to see you in another video. But thanks for listening. Bye-bye.